Hi there, and welcome to the Complexity.fm podcast. Today we are here with Brendan Beyer. Brendan is a developer, he is a founder of Flightcontrol, and also a pilot. So I'm super excited to have you here and talk about the nerdy stuff of the tech industry, the story behind Flightcontrol, and your passion about aviation. Brendan, how's it going?
Going great. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So I mentioned it. You are the founder of Flightcontrol. Can you briefly explain what that is, what the product is?
Yeah. So I been a software engineer my whole career, was doing consulting, and really liked the experience of platforms as a service like Heroku and Vercel. But I kept running into too many limitations, and I was like, well, why can't we have this really good developer experience on AWS directly? Like, this should be possible. And so that's what Flightcontrol is. It's the journey of setting out to be like, how can we make the AWS user experience much better so that people who don't have DevOps skills can just come in and easily deploy stuff to AWS.
So the user experience is like on Heroku, you have a GUI to place your database servers, your app servers, and the like. But the deployment is actually done in your AWS account. So
Exactly.
in the user's AWS account.
Exactly. Yes.
And this was at a time when the whole takeover, so to say, of Heroku by Salesforce has taken place. I mean, you started Flightcontrol back in 2022, right?
2021 was whenever we started the company, started building, but I think it launched at the very beginning of 22. Yeah.
Okay. So you at the time you were launching, you didn't know that the free plan was shut down, or?
No, because when was that? That was like a couple years after that, I believe.
I looked it up. I looked it up. It was like between August and November 2022.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but that was pure coincidence, right?
Yeah. But actually, it didn't really affect us.
Oh, I was assuming that maybe that was like a big influx for marketing in some way.
Maybe a little bit, but not that much, because our Flightcontrol is not good for like free users, hobby users. Those people that you don't want to spend money, and you just want the most basic, quickest thing to deploy something. But with Flightcontrol, you have to go sign up for AWS. You have to go through the sign up process, enter your credit card in AWS, and either try to go find AWS free credits or just pay for it or whatever. Even if Flightcontrol's free tier would cover you as an individual person, you're still on the hook for the AWS cost. So we've never been like a hit for indie users. It's always like teams that, or startups and enterprises that want that control over their infra.
Yeah, so you're still left with your AWS bill, even if you're on the Flightcontrol free plan. Yes. I totally get that, but you almost answered the second half of the question, like the actual targeted user group. I mean, Heroku, they were really targeting like a lot of indies, but also like smaller teams. And with the Salesforce endeavor, I would assume they focus more on enterprise customers. Is Flightcontrol somewhere in the middle, or what is the typical Flightcontrol customer?
So Flightcontrol is mostly good for teams that do not have a DevOps engineer. Mm-hmm. If you have a DevOps engineer, they want more control than Flightcontrol gives you, which is the precursor to the other topic we're going to talk about.
So then if you had a DevOps, you would use something maybe like Terraform or something?
Yeah, probably.
And Flightcontrol is more like an easier way to access it while still being structured, more structured than the AWS dashboard, right?
Yes. So you have this kind of progression of companies. You're a startup, and then you want to deploy quickly. So either use something like Flightcontrol to get up on AWS quickly, or you use something like Vercel or Railway to get up quickly. But then you reach a point where you need more control for compliance or whatever, which typically leads to you migrating to AWS. Mm-hmm. Flightcontrol makes that easier. Maybe you end up hiring a DevOps engineer. Maybe they're writing some Terraform stuff. But then as you scale, then how Are your developers having to write Terraform? Oftentimes that tends to be the case. DevOps are writing modules. Developers have to actually use them, which just becomes cumbersome, easy for them to mess up, which leads to platform engineering, where a lot of big enterprises end up having a platform team that builds some kind of internal platform that is an intermediate between DevOps and developers. So it's kind of like recreating a platform as a service, but exactly according to their needs. That's running their own Terraform.
So a public internal developer platform, kind of.
Yes. Internal developer platform is the word.
Is the key word here. Yeah. Okay, cool. So how did you build it? What is the technology behind Flightcontrol?
So Flightcontrol is full stack TypeScript using Next.js, unfortunately. We built the first version. So the first version was fine in Next.js pages directory, like the OG Next.js. Yeah. But then when we hired designers, the branding and proper UI design, then we built a whole new dashboard using Next.js app router, which was just new at that point, but it seemed to be like the future with server components and stuff. And that has been the worst nightmare. Like the performance is terrible. It's bugs. You see all the security stuff. So never again using Next.js.
Haven't you built a JavaScript framework by yourself?
Yeah, built a thing that was supposed to be like a Ruby on Rails for Next.js. Kind of built on it. I ended up forking Next.js at one point and trying to compete with them. That didn't end well.
Can imagine. Okay. So, but it's not that it's an open core or something. So it's just a hosted service, right?
Flightcontrol?
Flightcontrol, yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And one thing that we forgot to mention is actually Flightcontrol is a YC funded company.
Yes.
When did you get in there? Was it also like at the very beginning or?
In the middle of 2021, I was working as a consultant and my co-founder also was, and we didn't have cash that we could just quit our jobs to work on Flightcontrol. And so we were trying to find VC funding so that we could quit our jobs, work on it full time. And that was one of the hardest seasons ever because it was absolutely miserable trying to raise funding for a product that didn't exist yet. I was also shooting for too high a valuation because I thought the popularity of Blitz.js would like help with that and didn't. And we were basically getting nowhere after a few months. And toward the end, I'd applied to YC as just a Hail Mary. Like I'd applied a few times before, hadn't got in, so I had zero expectations. But then all of a sudden, one day on like a Monday, we got an email saying, "Hey, you've been accepted for a YC interview on Wednesday." We're like, "What?
What?"
That's amazing.
So you attribute that to pure luck?
So no, I think it was actually, it is a good idea. And the Blitz.js thing like showed that I have a knack for developer experience. It showed that I can ship things like that. So it's at least a good shot for getting an interview, but it's still like a big hurdle to actually get accepted.
So what was that process like?
So I reached out to Stripe Atlas. They had a program at the time where they would do mock interviews. And so we did a mock YC interview with them. You have 10 minutes in the YC interview, and it's just rapid fire questions like, how are you going to be a big company? How do you know users need this? And you have to know your stuff. And so we got there to the interview and seemed like we did okay. But then you just wait and see. And so if you get accepted, you're going to get a call later that day, usually the evening, or you get a rejection email like the next day. And so we're just waiting. It's like 10 p.m. my time in Ohio. And I get a call from an unknown number in New York. I'm like, oh no, this might be it. And sure enough, it's YC saying, congratulations, you're accepted. And so I went jumping and yelling down the hallway, and it was fun.
Well, how long did you wait?
I think the interview was in the morning sometime. So at least half a day.
Half a day? Okay. Did you start smoking or something?
No.
Very good. So and after that, how did the program help your company or you personally?
Well, the first thing was within a week of getting accepted to YC, we had raised $1 million total. So it was
Wow.
immediate trigger for the other people, investors that we had been talking to be like, okay, all right, we'll commit. And so that was a huge help. So we could go ahead and quit our job, start working full time. And then we went through YC in winter of 22, which was COVID era. And so we were actually the last batch to be fully remote, which was unfortunate or fortunate, depending how you look at it. We didn't have to move to SF, but we're also missed out on a lot of the in-person stuff. So it is what it is. I think it was also the largest batch. And so it's part of it. But it was way more valuable than I expected. I got the content was super good. The weekly meetings that you have were helpful. And the 3 months is just like this pressure cooker that teaches you discipline and focus on the right things. And it's a bit it wasn't like that stressful, but it's definitely the pressure. Like you basically put as much pressure on yourself as you want. You tell them what goal do you want to meet at the end, and they try to help keep you accountable towards that.
So it's like between hand holding and pressure there, kind of. Yeah. Okay, got it. So you would recommend that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I recommend it. The halo effect you get from it, the content and the training. There was even a company in our batch that had 1 million ARR as 2 people, and they were in there
when they started.
And you're like, yeah, and you're like, well, why are you in here? But you learn so much.
And how does it help with like getting customers or other investors on board?
I'm not sure about how helpful it is for getting customers. Depending on what your product is, you may be able to sell it to your batchmates. We didn't really even try for that because I don't know why. I think a lot of them already had stuff deployed at that point. For investors, it definitely helps because you have this demo day at the end. And so the last month is like this time point where everybody in the world knows that you're fundraising. And so I think I had 40, 60, 50, somewhere between 40 and 60 investors like reach out cold to us.
Wow.
And so a couple of weeks before demo day, I had 40 investor meetings in 1 week, just like one after the other with little breaks in between. And our whole round was like done before demo day.
Wow.
So that's like so easy compared to not having that deadline. Because the problem is investors just try to drag you out as much as they can if they can. Wait till somebody else kind of jumps the gun. And so it's a really kind of fixed timeline that really helps.
Yeah, got it. Very impressive story. Actually super cool. So how did the whole batch like perform? It was one of the COVID batches, so it was completely remote.
Correct.
Were they people like applying a second time and having the in-person experience, or
no?
Have you some point of comparison somehow?
I don't know. I know that I think you get a lot more camaraderie and probably more like sharing and trying other people's stuff when you're in person, and it's also smaller now than it was with the remote batch. It was just so many people. It was like impossible to know everyone in their products.
Got it. And so you got your round closed, and how did you get customers?
So I had a lot of awareness, Twitter audience, etc., from the Blitz.js framework days. So that was how we got initial awareness, basically through Twitter.
That was it?
Yeah. And we've done basically zero outbound stuff since then. It's been growing organically through word of mouth, social, SEO.
Not even paid ads or something like that?
We've tried a few paid ads here and there, but couldn't really get them to work. Which we found out like it became really hard to try to sell Flightcontrol because we realized that like the product is too restrictive, too limiting. And the market that actually is good for Flightcontrol is actually like really small. And so there was a point about a year ago where we were like, Flightcontrol is It's actually a bad product, and we need to start over.
Got it. Okay. And now you're working on kind of a successor. It's not really launched yet, but it's has public documentation, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
So
So we've been working on a
what is
brand
that?
new product over the past year to take all the good things about flight control and fix all the problems. And it's called Ravion. Ravion.com's website is not up yet. The docs is up, but the website will be launched very soon. And we're going to do a public launch soon. We've already announced it to all the flight control users. So they already know what's going on. And we're going to be building kind of one-click migration for them. Some of them have already started migrating manually. But Ravion solves a similar problem of simplifying cloud infrastructure and deployments without sacrificing control. And the big problem that flight control has is too limited. But ultimately, Ravion is a framework for internal developer platforms.
Got it.
For small teams, we have really great defaults, standard production-ready modules that are backed by Terraform. So just like with flight control, you can sign up and immediately deploy all kinds of stuff to AWS without having to know Terraform or AWS. It just works. But as you scale or larger companies come in, you have DevOps or platform teams, you can either fork and customize our standard modules or remove them completely and add all your own custom modules. So you can bring your own Terraform, turn it into this really nice UI for developers that have logs, metrics, deployment automation, CI/CD pipelines that run in your account. And it becomes this huge like powerhouse to really simplify all your cloud stuff.
So in flight control, you have the choice between doing it like on the GUI or writing a like flight control specific configuration file.
Yes.
So does that mean if you're talking Terraform for the new project now, does that mean that you had kind of a infrastructure as code engine like Terraform implemented by yourself for flight control, or how did that work?
So good question. Flight control would create your initial infrastructure with a CloudFormation stack. But every update after that was surgical API calls. So it was code engine, if you will, temporal workflows. But with Ravion, everything is Terraform based. We will be supporting CloudFormation and other things. But right now it's all Terraform. And so everything that our standard modules, it's all Terraform. You can see all the Terraform resources that you can do state surgery if you have to. And so it's much more flexible there, yeah. But you still have a config file that is your input to Terraform. So
got it.
You have the really nice UI, which is actually all config driven. So there's just a YAML config that will map UI inputs into Terraform variables. And so you can come into the UI, you get all the nice help, select boxes and everything. But then with the CLI, you can pull that config into a local file and also push it and see diffs. And you can do plan and apply. So you have that flow of, and it's more flexible than flight control was. You can start in UI, easily pull it into a config file or switch.
So it's as flexible as Terraform itself, but it's way easier. Is that the selling point actually?
The Ravion interface, like as a developer and you're using it, you don't have to know Terraform. You're not touching Terraform. It's just under the hood.
But you still can do anything you could do with Terraform, right?
Yes. And you can run your own Terraform stack in Ravion. So we have a module like an ECS cluster, an ECS web service, a static site, a Lambda. But you can also create a Terraform stack where you connect your code repo of your Terraform variable files, and then you get this really nice UI to see your state history and the resources and the diff of each resource. So this is like a Terraform cloud product or Spacelift or env0.
So essentially, it's the orchestration platform and UI on top of Terraform, right?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Plus deployments, logs, and metrics.
So deployment meaning also some kind of CI/CD.
So there's two aspects. We have the deployment managers that will automate deployments to ECS, to EC2 instance, if you want a permanent EC2 instance like a VPS, and we're also working on Kubernetes now, and that will integrate with Argo CD or deploy Helm charts directly. And so it gives you a really nice UI to view like what's actually running, the instances of that container that's running, the logs, the metrics. So that's a deploy manager. And then we also have a GitHub style CI/CD actions for orchestrating builds and deploys. And that will just trigger the deploy manager.
How does it play with Terraform as such? I used to do some Terraform at some point, but then there was this thing where they changed the license, and like a lot of companies and not also the space something stuff and a few others, I forgot the name, had some problems, and then there is this tofu stuff, which doesn't go well with the meat eaters. So what's the situation then? Just out of curiosity, like, is this, I guess, obviously, since you build a product, I guess it's completely safe to do it, but like, what's like in the Terraform world at this point?
We're doing the same thing all the others are doing, where we support Terraform up to version like 1.5 or whatever the latest open source version is, and then OpenTofu. And so we recommend OpenTofu for everything because you get the latest, it's community driven, etc.
Cool. And another question I have is, so when you want to just start, you don't need to know Terraform, and it's all like click UI, or do you need to like kind of have some knowledge?
You need zero knowledge of Terraform to start, and you can either use click UI to start, or you can have agents run it through CLI and config files, or a mix. It's very flexible.
What about the knowledge of the AWS? Because with platforms like Vercel and a few others, they have their own abstractions, which usually are quite simple, and it's really like, I want database here, I want some workers there, and that's it. With AWS, it's not always that simple. There is a lot of services, and there is a lot of nuances to each service. And again, the question really is like, do you have some of your own abstractions on top of AWS, or is user supposed to kind of at least have a basic understanding of like what is Lambda, what is RDS, what is ABCD?
So we have a rule that we can't abstract away the underlying AWS stuff. So we directly map to it and we use the AWS language, but we package it in such a way with helpful descriptions and readmes and guides and things. So with the idea that you can come in without any AWS experience and get going. And you're going to learn about AWS along the way because you're going to have to create a VPC module, which is a network to put your stuff in. And then you'll create an ECS cluster that's in that. And then you'll create an ECS web service that goes in there. And so we are combining things together in a way that makes sense. So like the ECS cluster module includes load balancers in it. And so there's toggles in there. Do you want a public load balancer, private load balancer, with helpful guides? But there is some expectation that you want to embrace the call it small amount of friction that AWS has in order to gain the control and the scalability and the performance that you gain from that. So it's not for hobbyists that want to just, or people who have a lovable app and they would just want to deploy it quickly to Vercel or whatever.
Yeah. Outside of not having the DevOps person, and this is something I have mostly worked within small teams. And it was like a common issue that at some point, if you deploy to cloud, you might need a DevOps person, and it might be for a few reasons. One is that your devs don't have a knowledge or deep enough knowledge of AWS. Other reason might be also that they just don't want to do it, or like you don't want the friction. But let's say you do in your team some stuff and you are able to deploy. are there any other benefits to your product? Meaning, for example, common problem in AWS is cost, and monitoring and all this other stuff. So, and the AWS console is not, known for the best UI ever. So do you have anything in your system which helps with the part after stuff is deployed?
Yes, tons of stuff. So often if you are manually doing stuff with Terraform or whatever, you probably have a CI/CD pipeline that is running Terraform, like plan and applies, and there's not probably any GUI around it. It's maybe some stuff in the PR. So that's one place over here. And then you probably have another pipeline that's building and deploying your code. But for those deploys, you probably are using a CLI to trigger, to deploy to Kubernetes or ECS, maybe Argo CD. But in a lot of cases, you don't get a good UI to see the deployment, how it's happening, how it's possibly failing, or at least it's an isolated spot. And then you have logs and metrics after you deployed, and that's probably in some other system that you have to go find. If you're using AWS directly, you have CloudWatch, logs, and console, and it's like pretty clunky and hard to use, and there's charts over here and metrics over there and scattered around. So what Ravion does is combines all of those into a single module, a single UI, so that you open up your web service, you see your CloudWatch metrics, and you can change the time range, the period, whether it's per hour, per minute. You can see your logs and search and filter them in a very easy way with a guided UI that's much easier than AWS console. And then you get your stack changes right next to it, and then your deployments. And so if there's any problem with your infrastructure change or your code deployment, like you have all the information right there in one place, which makes it easy for humans and then also easy for agents, so they're not having to run around and waste lots of tokens trying to gather all the context.
Cool. Is it so? I guess since you are using Terraform, it is language and framework agnostic, or do you have something for like I am a Ruby on Rails person and like what's the easy way to deploy my app? You have something framework or language specific, or is it just really framework language agnostic layer?
So at the core, it's completely agnostic. It's also cloud agnostic. We only support AWS pipeline runners at the moment, but we will be adding GCP support later this year and also Azure. But your Terraform can provision infrastructure anywhere. Vercel, it can manage Planetscale, it can manage GCP stuff. We support RailPack, which will generate a Docker file. So that's sort of like a layer on top. If you don't have a Docker file, it'll basically generate one for you automatically. Other than that, we don't have any other language-specific enhancements. That is something that possibly we would add in the future if it makes sense. So our philosophy is start with like the most basic core primitive. That is the most powerful thing you can do with zero limits, and then add simplifications on top of it to enhance it when it makes sense.
Got it. I want to quickly circle back to that mythical DevOps person that the teams are lacking, apparently. I mean, if we had a DevOps guy like one of the modern Scrum Masters, so to say, here, they would tell us, well, there is no DevOps guy because DevOps is a mindset and not a role. And I was wondering if like products like Ravion or Ravion in particular help with that kind of adapting to that mindset. You write it, you run it. Because like, as I understand is it gives you the flexibility and the full control of the AWS primitives, but it packages in a way that's easier accessible. So does it foster the DevOps mindset in a way?
Yes. So a lot of this is about shift left or developer self-service.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ravion is 100% about developer self-service and also expanding into agent self-service, right? So the The problem there is if you had developers or agents running wild with raw Terraform, it's so easy to mess stuff up. And so you have to have guardrails and things in place as you scale. And so Ravion is that intermediate system that DevOps or platform engineers can say, hey, this is only what's possible. You can add required policy checks, manual approvals, whatever you need. And then developers or agents can just run freely and easily without messing stuff up. So 100%, like we're all about streamlining that whole thing. Like developers can't just be doing all the infrastructure changes or like fixing all the things that developers or agents break. Like that's the platform's job.
So you can easily, for example, create kind of a dynamic environment or like a sandboxed separate copy of your production and let, for example, agent play there without deleting production database if you use latest GPT.
Yes, exactly. So we're adding like environment tier, so you can say, hey, this is a tier 1 environment that is your top level production. Like it's very restricted all the way down. And being as preview, it doesn't exist yet, but we're working on it very soon, which is preview environments so that you can easily spin up temporary infrastructure on pull requests. Again, that's running your Terraform, tearing it down after, but then you get the UI, GitHub comments, all the things.
Makes sense. Like we had a lot of buzzwords here, like shift left was the last one. I really like that. Shift left is perfect. Anyway, so we talked in the introduction.
Sorry to interrupt. The best one was like DevOps is the mindset.
Yeah, it's true. Sorry, I had to say that, but it's true. Yeah,
I agree with that. It sounds good in theory. In practice, it's not that easy to follow.
Yeah, the difference between theory and practice, we see that all over the place. Yeah, correct. So what I was wondering is like, Ravion gives me that flexibility. It gives me also the packages that makes things easier for me. But it's also about self-service. So how is it different from like products like open source products like Crossplane or something like that allow you to build an internal developer platform?
So I think the Ravion is way simpler than anything that has ever existed. And I believe we've managed to do that because you have to understand the fundamental building blocks of like the domain that you're operating in and build according to those. But you can't abstract them away. So basically you have to take the core building blocks, enhance them individually, and then enhance the relationships and how they work together. And I think that we've done that in a way that is like mind-blowingly simple. Like there's just a few different pages and things, but there's a million lines of code behind it that actually makes it all like function really well. And so I think that's the big benefit of like why, if you already have something or have like tried some of those platforms in the past and you're like, this is like too hard. Ravion is like a whole different ballpark. The level of developer experience is like way better than all of those other things. Like this is like Vercel. This is like taking the AWS console and making it Vercel. It's Vercel for your own cloud, essentially.
Got it. I mean, that makes total sense because like when you're using stuff like Crossplane, you definitely have a DevOps team, not only a DevOps person, but then you have maybe you even have a Crossplane team then. Or is it Crossplane or is it Backplane? I don't remember. I'm bad at names.
Crossplane. There's different ones.
Crossplane. Is it Crossplane? Yeah. Okay.
So we have small teams that are like, so they're provisioning the default modules that we have for standard services and stuff. But now they're also having their agents write little Terraform stuff, and it's all right in there alongside of it. And then you can actually create custom modules, which we didn't kind of touched on it, but you can actually customize the entire UI, the forms, everything. And so people like creating their own custom modules because it's very easy. It's easy for agents. It's actually a very complex implementation. But agents came along at the right time to like let us do this super powerful thing, but make it very easy as well.
Now that you mention it, I just realized we are more than half an hour in, and have really talked about AI. I really appreciate that, by the way. Thank you both for that. But now I have to bring it up somehow because, what is preventing me? I know AWS is a complex beast, but I have even if I don't have a DevOps mindset or a DevOps person, I have a clear picture of what my app needs in terms of infrastructure. So why wouldn't I wipe code it? Why would I not go to Claude and say, okay, put that on AWS, do whatever you want, make no mistakes, and return when you're done? Why is Ravion? Maybe not Ravion in particular, but why is a deterministic process better here? And what's the future of this DevOps mindset?
Well, in the past week on Twitter, I saw that GPT ran RM, root and destroyed somebody's entire machine. And also another agent destroyed a production database. So
and another agent did the opposite and uploaded the entire home directory to XAI server. So yeah.
Well, so Anthropic uploaded the whole cloud code, source code, right? So
yeah, something like that. Totally unbelievable.
If you're a solo person, a very small team, sure, you can vibe code it. If you're a bit more established, or you actually have DevOps person, and they can set up a lot of their own kind of tooling for pipelines and stuff around agents to still feel like you're kind of vibe coding a Ravion platform. But at the end of the day, you do not have a single place that you can go to see all your infrastructure, to easily see the cost for stuff, to easily see alarms and alerts, logs, and metrics. Your agents can go do that and find it, but somebody needs to come in and see what's the architecture, where what servers actually exist and stuff. And so then you can have your agents maintain a markdown file, or maybe it becomes a database. And before long, you're going to want something like Ravion that's this kind of thing that tracks the state of your infrastructure, that starts enforcing policies around role-based access control for interns coming in, developers versus DevOps. And there's just an endless amount of things that you're going to need safeguards and visibility that you get with Ravion for such an affordable price.
Well, let me try to phrase the question a bit differently. The whole journey, from AWS console to Flightcontrol and now to Ravion. If I understand you correctly, the Ravion switch or the fresh new product development was mainly to increase the flexibility, because turns out the Flightcontrol primitives were too limiting for some users. But that would be in my opinion, Flightcontrol started before we even had ChatGPT. And what I learned about Ravion today is that would be the normal progression, even if there was no AI agent around at all. So what do you expect software engineering teams and or DevOps team, how they work in the future, and how is that different from how they worked when Flightcontrol started? If that makes sense.
I think people are wanting to use agents for everything, right?
Sure.
So right now, it's a lot of human-driven stuff. In the future, it's probably going to become more autonomous. But I think the beauty of Ravion is you can see your dashboard, you can see a service, you can open up, you see a build, a deploy, some kind of log error. Anywhere in the app, you can just take the URL, paste it to your agent, and be solve the problem. And if it has the Ravion CLI installed and the docs MCP, it can just go to town. It's one CLI to pull all the logs or metrics from AWS directly through the Ravion CLI. And so it's everything that you need is right there. It can push changes, apply changes. It can require manual preview. So anything that you can do to enhance that, make it easier for agents in the human agent interaction, and reducing things, especially as the Fable cost is crazy. Like anything you can simplify, make it easier for you to get the information and to make changes is like a big one.
But like the underlying processes inside the team dynamics, like the mechanics of how they work together, do you see that changing with AI or not? Like what I mean is
like between dev and DevOps.
Yeah, or like if you see that as one team, or like the company, like the organization that wants to develop software and put it into production, like. Okay, some of the code for the application might now be generated by AI or might not be. That doesn't really matter for infrastructure. The infrastructure might be, like, for example, you have an agent going through the logs and tell it, fix the problem. Okay, that might be assisting. But do you think that the general dynamics inside the team will change a lot?
Change from what?
From like with AI, like pre AI and post AI, do you think that the way teams work to build software and put that into production will change?
I mean, I think it is. I think it is changing.
Okay,
like,
that depends on how you look at it, right?
At least some things are changing. Like the PRs generally have like lots more lines of code now. And then you're using AI assisted tooling to review them and AI to chat with the changes. I think I actually have a better understanding of my teammates' changes now with AI reviews. Like we're using Linear. I love Linear's new review tool, the diff, because it's right in Linear. It's super fast, so it's like a way better interface than the sluggish GitHub UI. And it has this nice AI summary grouping stuff and an agent right there that you can chat with.
Isn't that funny that we have AI, but we still have companies that make a living from big tech companies failing to deliver good UI? Okay, nonetheless, but the way
I would say it's a kind of off topic, but I would say it has just become easier for small companies to disrupt bigger companies because of the AI.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason is that if in the big companies, it's corporate culture often is like, you do minimum amount of work just to get by. And if you are supposed to use AI, you use AI, and you don't really care, or many people don't really care. And with AI, it's even worse. So they produce a lot of code, but don't necessarily take care of it, while they can still look productive. And in the smaller companies, it's completely reversed. So, usually you have like 2-3 devs who care or are co-founders. They do care about the code, and now they have agents or AI, right? So the quality, I would say, goes down in bigger companies because of this. At least for now. Over time, it might kind of, world will heal at some point, but right now that seems to be the case. And the smaller companies are faster thanks to AI. And that might be maybe the equilibrium right now why I think the smaller companies, might be disrupting the bigger companies more easily at this point.
I agree. And the smaller companies can make the level of UX that they can create with AI is like off the charts. Like there's so many things in the Ravion like UI around, like we have an in browser, code editor and diff stuff, like the niceties, like there's like a ton of stuff that in the past would have just been way too much work to be worth it. But now you just dispatch this agent, and all of a sudden you have this really like fancy thing that actually is like so helpful and valuable. And there's so many things of that we've encountered while building. It's like oh yeah, this would be nice. Just go have the AI build it. And so if you are someone that is really has a high level bar for product and good product taste and stuff, like the sky is there's no limit.
Yeah.
I have a. Oh, you have some question, Bas?
No, go ahead.
I have a question about this Ravion. So it's the same company as the Flightcontrol, or it's like a separate entity?
Yeah. Same company.
Same. It's like a spin-off product.
Yeah. So it's a new product. It's using the same database. So your like Flightcontrol, your organization, like your top level account and the members, like all the same. It's shared across both. And so, current Flightcontrol users have started using Ravion. You can use it in parallel, so slowly migrate. And we are continuing to maintain Flightcontrol for the foreseeable future. I think we promise like at least a year of maintenance from whenever we have the one-click migration done and plenty of notice. So yeah, so it's a gradual migration. And I think we've done really well at kind of framing it, being like, hey, like this, has all the good things of Flightcontrol, but then it fixes like this, and this that so many people have complained about for a long time. And it just required a total, architecture change to solve those. And so it's been super well received. That was one of my concerns. Is like, you don't want people to like get freaked out, whatever. But basically I've been pitching it as like, hey, this is Flightcontrol's next version. And they've been really receptive since we've promised like it's going to be very easy to migrate. So
at what point did you ask like existing customers about the plans and the direction, and at what point did you get feedback from them?
So this was very early on, like a year ago. We started conversations with some of our big ones, and so we've had ongoing conversations. A lot of our bigger companies we've reached out to like months ago. We've been in conversation demoing them, and so they're also the ones with the kind of the bigger problems, limitations with Flightcontrol, and so they're really excited for the flexibility that Ravion gives. Yeah.
Got it. So it's the same company, but it's definitely not the same framework.
Yeah.
So what did you replace Next.js with?
Yeah. So it has a Go backend, Go API, and I never did Go before this, and I probably still couldn't handwrite Go to save my life. But I've shipped so much Go code, but I can read it and it compiles, and I understand architecture and all that. So the syntax just doesn't even matter anymore. So Go backend, still using temporal for power and workflows. And the front end is Tamstack with an E. So not Tamstack Start for the dashboard. The website is Tamstack Start, but the dashboard is a regular single page app, and it's using our public API. So all of our API endpoints are already like available for users by default. And we have a lot of schemas. So you have like the pipeline schemas for how the pipeline config. You have schemas for the module definitions, which has all the different kind of stacks, configurations, build configurations. The configuration for like how do you find a text input, a select input, a list of objects, a map of objects. And so this is stuff that we need to validate and enforce on both the server and the client. So the backend's Go, the front end's TypeScript. So this has been a big challenge, and also errors, right?
Sure.
And error definitions. And so we have this huge schemas package, which is using TypeSpec. TypeSpec is a open source project created by Microsoft, I believe, that is like the best thing. Like that's the biggest pitch for if you're something new for this is go check out TypeSpec, because it lets you define any kind of schema. Our API is defined in TypeSpec. Our other schemas are defined in TypeSpec, and you can generate anything from it. So we generate OpenAPI from it for the API. We generate Go clients, TypeScript clients. And then for the other schemas, we generate Zod schemas for TypeScript. And then it generates some other custom stuff for Go schemas. And so we have a tremendous amount of code that is generated for TypeScript and Go. And we also generate documentation from it. So that is like been like something super fun and super powerful that we hadn't done in the past.
Okay, so but for these schemas, we are talking more or less mostly about Open API specs, right? So it's more or less.
So we have both.
REST
The
API?
the API is all Open API stuff, but then we have a bunch of like just product configs, like the pipeline configuration. And so that we need to take a pipeline configuration and run validation against it, and make sure it resolves defaults properly, things like that. And so that's where like the Zod schema versus the
but
Go
there's not an
structs
additional layer of gRPC or something in between.
No.
Luckily.
Yeah.
That's always in maintenance hell.
Maybe a few logistic questions. And feel free to say you don't want to say if it's some internal, monetary or other sensitive stuff. So you kind of funded this out of the, I guess, profits or revenue from the flight control, right?
Correct.
You mentioned it took how long to build this on the side? A year?
Yeah.
Can you share, not really the cost, but how many developers, full-time or man days, or like just the ballpark? I'm just wondering, like, so I guess you
small
still
team.
did the flight control, fully supported and did this on the side with the same team?
Yes, we're a small team, but spent probably 90%, 80 to 90% of our time on Ravion for the last year. And we have shipped a bunch of fixes and improvements to flight control, because there's a lot of like, especially bigger customers that run into little things here and there, like, can you add this to flight control and we can ship it quickly. So we've continued to maintain that and even add new features. And about a year ago, we reached profitability with flight control. And so we haven't had any pressure to, we've been able to take the time that it needs to build the thing that we really need to build. And so this is not like a pivot. It's not like, this is not a Hail Mary. We're dying and now this has to work or we're done. No, we've already established we're profitable. And now we're like, all right, now we can spend the time to build the thing that we really need to go the distance.
Cool. So like kind of version 2 of.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
You said small team. Can you like share more? Like 3, 5, 7?
3. There's 3 of us.
Okay. Cool.
Yep. We had more, but some of them moved on like a year ago, and it actually was perfect for this, for building something new where you're trying to figure a lot of stuff out, and you can't spec all this out ahead of time. And so it's actually been perfect, and it has been so much fun. It's like starting over. So we started 5 years ago, and so much has changed. We've learned so much. AI came along at the right time, and it has just been like the funnest year in the entire history of the company, I think, because you get to build so much cool stuff, build it in a much better way, and yeah.
So those
3 people, they're from the beginning, right?
So it's my co-founder. I have a co-founder. So it's him and I plus one employee that's been with us for probably 3 or 4 years. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Very cool.
You said magic word again, AI. Can you maybe just briefly share what models you use, what harness or whatever it is called these days, agent? Is it Cloud Codes, Codex, CLI, Open Code? God knows what else there is.
I'm a open code. I don't know what the right term is, but I use it pretty much exclusively. And I am really liking Fable. Like, I feel like Fable overall is like a lot better than GPT 5.6 Sol. But it's so expensive. I can't use the Claude Max because I'm on open code. So what I've been doing is I using 5.6 Sol, but on like extra higher max. It's actually getting me closer to Fable kind of like quality. I was just using medium, which is what I'd been using like 5.5 and different things. But I think 5.6 Sol is actually it's better on like X higher max. But I'll still use Fable for like content, wording, marketing kind of stuff, or debugging stuff. So last week we had a production, a user hit some kind of bug, and give it read-only access to AWS and whatever. And Fable found the bug like quite quick, and then like half the time, at least, as Saul was still trying to find it, and I finally just killed it.
Okay.
Very
And
cool.
when you use Fable, you pay by token or you switch to
Token.
cloud code?
Oh, actually, I'm using OpenCode Zen.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So it has some included amount. I don't know how much it's
Yeah.
worth, but I end up running out of that and then paying per token as well.
Okay, cool. And what is your like AI workflow, if you have any, in the team? Is it like we just try to outline the stuff by ourselves and then ask AI to implement this or that function, or is it like spec-driven development, as it is called these days?
Nothing fancy, kind of just winging it.
Just like a pair programmer.
I'm not sure on the other ones, but I think we're all probably about the same. Where like I put together a plan. I've been using like Ralph loops pretty heavily until recently. I haven't used it much. But if there was something that was like really, I don't know, with 5.6 and Fable, they're kind of, I feel like almost Ralph loops are like not important with them.
A lot of stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff that people were building.
But in the past, until recently, I was definitely getting much better result with a Ralph loop on like really complex stuff, like change all the error, like implement a custom error system throughout the whole code base, that kind of thing.
And you read the code, and then you create a PR, and then the colleague needs to review and read the code, or is it more like based on not reading the code and rather we do more like testing, or how is it?
So I'm reviewing the code on everyone's PRs, especially mine, more so, but not necessarily every single line. I'm focused more on architecture. And scrolling, I'm basically skimming all the code, looking for things that are like, doesn't make sense. Like a lot of times in the front end, I'll find code with like data fetching or stuff that's like, oh, this is slop. Like no, fix this. The back end is pretty good because we have really clear structure of database repositories for all of the database access, which kind of has like the authentication, like organization scoping built into that. So it's hard to mess up that. They have the API layer. We have the temporal workflows. And so those are all like structured really well. That the backend code is usually like pretty good. It's more like the front end or like the interfaces, like API naming or, things like that, that will improve. So definitely testing, definitely still reading the code. Not there's too much stuff you can't for a production system like this where users are depending on it. Can't just ship it willy-nilly.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I have one follow-up question regarding Ravion and how the product works, and that is about like the monitoring thing. Like you mentioned, if I use Ravion, I have access to metrics and my logs and all of that kind of stuff. Is it that you like spin up all the primitives for CloudWatch for me and then just give me a better way to access it, or is it something on your end that's doing the logging and monitoring?
We're pulling straight from CloudWatch. So in a module definition, you basically have the Terraform stack where you have the inputs that go into the Terraform variables, and then the stack has Terraform outputs that has like the log stream and things like that, and that is fed into the definition for the charts. And so that information is kind of stored in the module. And then so in our UI, we just query CloudWatch. For metrics, we cache them because you have to pay a very, very small fee, like when you're reading some of the CloudWatch stuff. So we'll cache some of the metrics. We don't cache logs, but we cache some of the metrics. So that as you're like opening the dashboard, multiple people coming through, like we save your costs there. But then CLI gives you the same thing. So you just run like Ravion logs, pipeline step, pass the step ID, and it just goes and pulls the data straight from CloudWatch.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that was really cool geeking around. I mean, I probably could come up with 1,000 more questions, but we have to keep an eye on the time, I guess, and not make it too boring for people listening to us. Brendan or Michal, do you have any interesting question now?
No, not anymore. I think it was very interesting. We learned how the thing is built with the AI for real. And yeah, I will definitely check out Ravion.
Yeah, that was really cool, Brendan. Thank you for taking the time. And if there's someone listening and still having one of those 1,000 questions, what is a good way to get in touch with you? Are you on
Brandon
LinkedIn?
at ravion.com, or I'm on X on Twitter at Flybear, Flybayer, yeah. And on LinkedIn, yes.
Okay, we put all of those down in the show notes. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.